The words hit me like a slap across the face. "You'll die alone in a nursing home, Margaret. Nobody will visit you. Nobody will care." My daughter-in-law, Victoria, whispered these words into my ear while hugging me goodbye at my 68th birthday dinner. To everyone else in the room, it looked like a tender embrace between a loving daughter-in-law and her aging mother-in-law. But I felt her cold lips against my ear. I felt the venom in every syllable. I felt the truth of what she really thought of me. My son David stood just 3 feet away, smiling, oblivious, checking his phone. He didn't hear what his wife had just said to his mother. Or maybe he did, and he simply didn't care anymore. I stood there frozen, still holding the birthday card they had given me. A generic card with a printed message. No personal note. Just their signatures in hasty handwriting, as if even that small effort was too much. "Thanks for dinner, Mom," David said without looking up from his phone. But I knew we wouldn't. I had cooked for 6 hours. I had made David's favorite meal, the pot roast with garlic mashed potatoes that I used to make every Sunday when he was a boy. I had baked a chocolate cake from scratch, the same recipe my mother had taught me 60 years ago, and all I got in return was a whispered threat and a premature goodbye. Victoria smiled at me as they walked toward the door. It was the same smile she always wore in front of David, sweet, polished, and completely fake. "Happy birthday, Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. 68 years. You're getting up there, aren't you? Time flies, as if my life were already over, as if I were already in that nursing home she had just promised me. I watched them leave in their expensive car, a BMW that David had bought with money I had given him for his business venture 3 years ago. $85,000 I had handed over without question because my son had said he needed it. The business had failed within 8 months. The car somehow remained. I closed the door and stood in my empty living room, surrounded by the remnants of a birthday party for one. The leftover pot roast, the half-eaten cake, the single happy birthday balloon I had bought for myself because nobody else had thought to bring one. And I smiled because Victoria didn't know something that would change everything. She didn't know that I owned the $2 million luxury apartment building where she and David had been living rent-free for the past 4 years. She didn't know that the penthouse she loved to brag about to her friends, the one with the rooftop terrace and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, belonged to me. She didn't know that with one phone call I could have her evicted, thrown out onto the street with nothing but her designer handbags and her poisonous personality. But I wasn't going to make that call, not yet. First, I needed to understand exactly how deep this betrayal went. I needed to know if my son was truly lost to me, or if he was simply blind to the monster he had married. And I needed to make sure that when justice came, it would be complete, public, and absolutely devastating. Let me tell you who I really am. My name is Margaret Chen. I am 60 years old. 7 million. Nobody knows this. Not my son, not my daughter-in-law, not my neighbors, not even my closest friends. To the world, I am a simple retired school teacher who lives in a modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs of Chicago. I drive a 12-year-old Honda Civic. I shop at discount grocery stores. I wear clothes from outlet malls and thrift shops. I have lived this way for 43 years, ever since I married my husband Henry in the spring of 1981. Henry was a quiet man with extraordinary vision. When I met him, he was working as a maintenance supervisor for a small apartment complex on the South Side. He earned $18,000 a year and lived in a 1-bedroom unit that smelled of old carpet and industrial cleaner. But Henry saw something nobody else did. He saw that real estate was the path to true wealth. Not stocks, not businesses, real estate. 50 each. One day I'm going to own that building I work in, and then I'm going to own the building next to it. I laughed. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I loved the fire in his eyes when he talked about his dreams. We got married 6 months later. I was 25. He was 28. We had $340 in our joint savings account and a rusted Ford Pinto that broke down every other week. But we had each other, and that was enough. I worked as a substitute teacher while Henry continued his maintenance job. Every penny we didn't absolutely need, we saved. We ate rice and beans 3 times a week. We didn't take vacations. We didn't buy new furniture. We lived like paupers, even when we didn't have to. When David was born in 1984, Henry cried, "This boy is going to have a better life than we had, Margot," and he kept that promise. By the time David was 5, Henry had saved enough for a down payment on a small duplex. We moved into one unit and rented out the other. The rental income covered most of our mortgage payment. By the time David was 10, we owned 3 properties. By the time he was 15, we owned 7. $2 million. Nobody knew, not our neighbors, not our friends, not even our own son. I asked Henry one night after we had just closed on our 15th property, a beautiful brownstone in Lincoln Park that would appreciate by 400% over the next 2 decades. Henry shook his head. "Because money changes people, Margot. I've seen it happen 100 times. Hard-working kids become lazy when they know there's an inheritance coming." "David isn't like that," I protested. "Not yet," Henry replied. "But he could become that way if we're not careful. Let him build his own life. Let him struggle a little." I didn't agree completely, but I trusted my husband's judgment. He had been right about everything else. So we continued living modestly. We continued driving old cars and wearing simple clothes. We continued being the nice elderly couple in the beige house, while our bank accounts and property holdings grew larger every year. Henry passed away 8 years ago on a Tuesday morning in March. He was 71 years old. A heart attack while eating the breakfast I had made him, just like every other morning for 43 years. One moment he was there, sipping his coffee and reading the newspaper. The next moment, he was gone. The grief nearly destroyed me. For 6 months, I barely left the house. I lost 20 pounds. I stopped answering the phone. I wanted to die too. But slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild my life. I took over management of our properties. I learned everything Henry had known about real estate investments, leases, and property maintenance. And I discovered that my quiet, modest husband had left me an empire. 23 properties across Chicago, rental income of $87,000 per month, a net worth that had grown to nearly $15 million. I was rich beyond anything I had ever imagined, and I was completely, utterly alone. David was 40 years old when Henry died. He was already married to Victoria by then, a woman he had met at a corporate networking event 5 years earlier. Victoria Crawford came from a wealthy family in Connecticut. Old money, country clubs, private schools. She had never worked a day in her life, but spoke constantly about her career in philanthropy, which as far as I could tell consisted of attending fancy charity galas and posting photos on social media. She was beautiful in that polished, manufactured way that expensive women often are. Perfect blonde hair, perfect white teeth, perfect designer wardrobe. But there was something cold behind her eyes, something calculating. I saw it the first time David brought her home. "Yes," I replied. She nodded slowly, her eyes lingering on the worn carpet, the old furniture, the family photos in their simple frames. "How cozy," she said. The way she said cozy made it sound like a disease. Henry saw it too. That night, after they left, he sat in his chair with a troubled expression. "That woman is going to be a problem," he said. "Maybe she just needs time to warm up to us," I replied. But she never did warm up. Over the years, Victoria maintained a consistent attitude of polite contempt toward us. She came to holiday dinners because David expected her to, but she always found excuses to leave early. She smiled and nodded during conversations, but never seemed to actually listen. Said, with a slight pause, as if even speaking my name was an inconvenience. When Henry died, Victoria came to the funeral in a stunning black dress that probably cost more than our monthly grocery bill. She hugged me, expressed her condolences, and then spent most of the reception on her phone in the corner. 2 weeks later, David called me with a request. "Mom, Victoria and I are looking at a new apartment, a penthouse in that luxury building downtown, the one with the rooftop terrace." "That sounds lovely," I said. "The thing is, it's expensive. $8,500 a month, and with my business just getting started, we're a little short on cash flow. I was wondering if maybe you could help with the rent for a few months." I closed my eyes. This was exactly what Henry had warned me about. "Well, if you could cover the first 6 months, that would be $51,000. $51,000 for an apartment." I should have said no. I should have told him to find something more affordable. I should have remembered Henry's wisdom about how money changes people. But he was my son, my only child, and I loved him. "Okay," I said. What David didn't know was that I recognized the building he was talking about, the Meridian Tower, 42 floors of luxury apartments, restaurants, and retail space. I knew it very well, $8 million, and it was now worth well over $2 million. When David mentioned he wanted to live there, I saw an opportunity. Instead of giving him $51,000 for 6 months of rent, I would let him live there rent-free, indefinitely. It was a gift of love, a secret gift from a mother who wanted to help her son without making him feel like a charity case. I made Harold promise never to reveal that I was the owner. "Are you sure about this, Mrs.?" Harold asked. "That penthouse rents for $12,000 a month. He's my son," I replied. For 4 years, David and Victoria lived in my building. They enjoyed the rooftop terrace, the concierge service, the private gym, the stunning views of Lake Michigan. And they never knew that every day they woke up in that penthouse, they were sleeping in their mother's property. The years passed, and things got worse. David's business failed, then his second business failed, then his third. Each time he came to me for money. $85,000 here, $40,000 there, $25,000 for emergency expenses that never seemed to be explained. In total, over the past 8 years, I had given my son $347,000 in cash, plus free housing worth approximately $576,000. Plus the gifts, the dinners, the holiday presents, nearly $1 million, for nothing in return but increasingly rare phone calls and increasingly cold treatment. Victoria's attitude grew bolder as the years went on. At first, her contempt was subtle, a raised eyebrow, a sarcastic comment disguised as a joke, a way of looking at me as if I were an insect she was too polite to swat. But gradually, she stopped pretending. She asked at one Thanksgiving dinner, "You could sell it and move into a nice little retirement community." "I like my house," I replied, "but it must be so much work for you, all that cleaning and maintenance." She smiled that cold smile. "For now." David said nothing. He just kept eating his turkey, pretending not to hear. Another time, at Christmas, Victoria made a comment about my clothes. "Is that dress from Goodwill, Margaret?" The dress was from a nice department store, purchased on sale for $60. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfectly respectable. "I like simple things," I said. "Simple is one word for it," Victoria replied, exchanging a smirk with David. And David laughed. My son laughed at his mother. That was the moment I realized I was losing him. Not to another woman exactly, but to a version of himself I didn't recognize. A version shaped by Victoria's values, Victoria's ambitions, Victoria's contempt for anyone who didn't match her narrow definition of success. The visits became less frequent. Once a month became once every 2 months. Then, once every 3 months. Phone calls dwindled to birthdays and holidays, and even those felt perfunctory, checking off a list kinds of calls. "Hi, Mom. Happy birthday. Can't talk long. We're heading out. Love you." 15 seconds. That was all I was worth to my son on my birthday. The final straw came 6 months before my 68th birthday, when I was hospitalized for 3 days with pneumonia. David came to visit once. For 45 minutes. Victoria didn't come at all. "She's really busy with her charity work," David explained. I nodded and said I understood, but I didn't understand. I couldn't understand how anyone could be too busy to visit their sick mother-in-law. When I was discharged from the hospital, I called David to ask if he could pick me up. I had taken a taxi there and didn't feel strong enough to take one back. "Gosh, Mom, I wish I could, but Victoria and I have a thing tonight, a dinner party at the Hendersons. Can't you take an Uber?" I ended up taking a taxi. The driver, a kind Nigerian man named Emmanuel, helped me to my front door and refused to accept a tip. "You remind me of my mother back home," he said with a warm smile. A stranger showed me more compassion than my own son. That night, alone in my house, still weak from the pneumonia, I made a decision. I was done being invisible. I was done being taken for granted. I was done pretending not to notice the contempt, the dismissal, the casual cruelty. If my son and his wife saw me as nothing more than an inconvenient old woman waiting to die, then I would show them exactly who they were dealing with. But I needed to be patient. I needed to gather information. I needed to understand the full extent of my son's transformation before I acted. And I needed allies. The first person I called was Harold Mitchell, my property manager. Harold was 58 years old, a former real estate lawyer who had been managing my properties for the past 6 years. He was discreet, competent, and fiercely loyal. More importantly, he had never liked Victoria. "I saw her at the building last week," Harold told me during our meeting at a quiet coffee shop downtown. "She was berating one of our maintenance workers because he accidentally left a smudge on the elevator door. Mrs. Your daughter-in-law is a terrible person. The staff at Meridian Tower despises her. She treats them like servants. She complains constantly about non-existent problems." Harold hesitated. "Mr. Chen is different. He's not cruel like his wife, but he doesn't stop her either." That was the most painful part. Not that Victoria was awful, but that David had allowed himself to become her accomplice through silence. "Harold, I need you to do something for me. I need you to document everything, every complaint Victoria makes, every interaction she has with the staff, because I'm going to need evidence." Harold nodded slowly. "I understand." My second ally came unexpectedly. Dorothy Williams was my neighbor, an 82-year-old widow who had lived next door to me for over 30 years. She was sharp as a tack, funny as a sitcom, and had raised 6 children who all adored her. We'd always been friendly, but after Henry's death, Dorothy became my closest friend. We had coffee together every Tuesday morning. We played cards on Friday nights. We kept an eye on each other the way neighbors used to do before everyone got too busy and too isolated. Dorothy had met Victoria exactly twice. That was enough. "That woman is a snake," Dorothy declared after the second meeting. "A well-dressed, well-spoken snake, but a snake nonetheless. Honey, I've been around for 82 years. I can spot a gold digger from a mile away, and that one is worse than a gold digger. At least gold diggers have clear motivations. Victoria Crawford is something else entirely," Dorothy snorted. "She came from money, right? Old Connecticut money. Those people think they're royalty. In her mind, your son was a step down, beneath her." I had never thought about it that way, but it made sense. Victoria always acted slightly superior to David, as if she were doing him a favor by being his wife. "You do what any smart woman does when she's been underestimated. You wait, you watch, you gather your strength. I'm 68 years old." Dorothy laughed. "Margaret, you own half the buildings in this city. You've got more power in your little finger than Victoria has in her entire Botoxed body. The question isn't whether you can strike." I thought about Victoria's whispered words. "I have the will," I said. The investigation began. Over the next 3 months, Harold compiled a detailed dossier on Victoria and David's life at Meridian Tower. It was worse than I had imagined. Victoria had made 47 formal complaints to building management in 4 years. She had demanded the firing of 6 different employees, 4 of which Harold had managed to prevent. She had threatened lawsuits over everything from water pressure to the color of the lobby flowers. But that wasn't the worst of it. Harold discovered that Victoria had been telling people she owned the penthouse. "She tells everyone they bought it 3 years ago," Harold reported. $2 million for it. "But they don't pay rent." "I know, but she's been lying to everyone, probably including your son." I also discovered where all the money I had given David had gone. It wasn't into his businesses. Those had been doomed from the start, poorly planned ventures that David didn't have the skills or work ethic to sustain. The money had gone to Victoria. Designer clothes, jewelry, spa treatments, luxury vacations to Paris, Milan, and the Maldives. A lifestyle that she couldn't possibly afford on her own, funded entirely by my gifts to my son. In 4 years, Victoria had spent over $280,000 on herself, using money I had given David, money I had worked my entire life to earn. But the final discovery was the one that broke my heart completely. Harold obtained a recording of a conversation between Victoria and one of her friends, captured accidentally by a security camera in the building's parking garage. "David's mother is such a burden," Victoria was saying. "She calls constantly. She expects us to visit. I wish. But David is still attached for some reason. He feels guilty about not seeing her more. Wait her out. She's 68. She can't have that many years left. When she dies, David inherits everything. The house, the savings, whatever else she's got hidden away." Victoria laughed. "In the meantime, I keep reminding David that his mother is a crazy old woman who needs professional care. I've already been dropping hints about nursing homes." The recording ended. I sat in Harold's office, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, tears of rage. This woman, this snake, had been plotting to have me institutionalized, not because I needed care, but because I was inconvenient, because she wanted me gone. And my son, my precious David, had been listening to her poison for years. I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath. "I want to destroy her," I said, "but I want to do it the right way. I want her to know exactly who she has been insulting all these years. I want her to feel the same helplessness she wanted me to feel." Harold nodded. "I'll help you." The plan came together over the next 2 months. First, I needed legal protection. I contacted a lawyer named Patricia Okonkwo, a fierce woman in her 50s who specialized in estate planning and family disputes. I had used her services once before to update my will after Henry's death, and I knew she could be trusted. "Mrs. Chen," Patricia said after reviewing all the evidence, "you have an ironclad case. Victoria has been living in your building under false pretenses. She has been defaming you to others. Legally, you could evict them immediately. You could sue Victoria for defamation." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Mrs. Chen, I'm going to be direct with you. Your son is a grown man. He has allowed his wife to treat you abominably for years. He has taken your money without gratitude. He has ignored your needs while indulging his own comfort. Yes, and that's why this is so painful. But you need to decide what outcome you want. Do you want reconciliation? Do you want justice? Do you want revenge?" I thought about it for a long time. "I want the truth," I finally said. "I want Victoria exposed. I want David to see what he's been enabling, and I want a chance, just a chance, to get my son back." Patricia nodded. "Then we need to create a situation where the truth becomes undeniable, a confrontation that Victoria can't spin or escape." "I have an idea," I said. "There's a Building Owners Association meeting next month. All the major property owners in the city will be there. Victoria has been bragging to her friends that she and David will be buying their own building soon." Patricia smiled. "I've never attended these meetings before. I always sent Harold as my representative. Nobody in that world knows who I am. And then I reveal who I really am, in front of everyone, in front of my son." Patricia's smile widened. "Mrs. Chen, that's not just a plan." The night of the Building Owners Association gala, I wore my best dress. Not my most expensive dress, which was hidden in the back of my closet, but the nicest one that Victoria had seen me wear. A simple navy blue dress that I had owned for 8 years. I wanted her to see me as she always had, as a poor, pathetic old woman. I wanted her guard down. The gala was held at the Palmer House Hilton, a stunning historic hotel in downtown Chicago. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, men in tuxedos, women in designer gowns. I arrived early and positioned myself near the entrance, sipping a glass of water and pretending to study the program. At 7:15, they walked in. David was wearing a tailored suit that probably cost $3,000. Victoria was stunning in a red designer gown, diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. They looked like they belonged here. They looked like they were somebody. Victoria spotted me immediately. Her expression flickered with surprise, then annoyance, then cold calculation. She said, approaching with David trailing behind her. "I was invited," I said simply. "Invited?" Victoria's eyes narrowed. "What kind of friend would invite you to a real estate gala?" David finally spoke, his voice tired. "Mom, this isn't really your kind of event. Maybe you should head home." "I'm fine, David." Victoria leaned close to David and whispered something. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw David's expression shift from tired to uncomfortable. "Mom, seriously, Victoria and I have important people to meet tonight. You being here is—" "No, I just mean, look, this is a business event. These people are major property owners, developers, investors. What are you going to talk to them about? Your garden?" The contempt in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. Victoria's poison had seeped deep into his soul. "I understand," I said quietly. They walked off without another word, immediately beginning to work the room. Victoria was in her element, charming and manipulating, dropping names and making promises. I watched from a distance, waiting. At 8 o'clock, the president of the association, a white-haired man named Franklin Reeves, called everyone to order. "Welcome everyone to the 47th Annual Building Owners Association Gala." There were polite applause. "Before we begin the awards portion of our evening, I'd like to acknowledge some of our most significant property owners." He began reading names. Each name was met with applause and respectful nods. "And finally," Franklin said, "I'd like to acknowledge someone who rarely attends our events, but who has quietly become one of the largest property owners in the city. A woman who started with nothing and built an empire worth nearly $15 million. The room went silent. Victoria's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. David's face drained of color. I stood up from my seat and walked toward the podium, my heart pounding but my stride steady. Franklin shook my hand warmly. "Mrs. Chen, it's an honor to finally meet you in person. Your late husband, Henry, was a legend in this business." "Thank you, Franklin," I said, speaking into the microphone. I looked out at the crowd, at the stunned faces, at my son, who looked like he had been struck by lightning, at Victoria, whose perfectly composed mask had shattered into pure terror. "Many of you don't know me," I continued. "I've always preferred to work quietly, behind the scenes. My husband and I believed that true wealth doesn't need to announce itself. We lived modestly. We saved obsessively." I paused, letting the words sink in. 23 properties, $87,000 a month in rental income, $7 million. The crowd murmured appreciatively. "One of my properties," I continued, "is a building called Meridian Tower. Some of you may know it. 42 floors, luxury apartments." Victoria made a small, strangled sound. "What some of you may not know is that my son and daughter-in-law have been living in that penthouse for the past 4 years, rent-free." The murmuring grew louder. What I recently discovered, however, is that my daughter-in-law has been telling people that she and my son own the penthouse. $2 million for it. Victoria stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're embarrassing yourself, Margaret," I asked calmly. "Let me share something else I discovered." I nodded to Harold, who pressed a button on his phone. Victoria's voice filled the ballroom. "David's mother is such a burden. She calls constantly. She expects us to visit." The color drained from Victoria's face. When she dies, David inherits everything. The house, the savings, whatever else she's got hidden away. The recording continued. "I've already been dropping hints about nursing homes." The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria looked around desperately, searching for an escape. But every face in the room was staring at her with disgust. David stood frozen, his face a mask of horror. "That recording," Victoria stammered, "it's fake. It's been manipulated. Margaret is crazy. She's been going senile for years. David will tell you." "David," I said, turning to my son, "is that what you'll tell them? That I'm senile?" David couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. 4 years ago, I continued, I gave you free housing because I loved you. I didn't tell you I owned the building because I didn't want you to feel like a charity case. I took a step closer to him. In 8 years, I have given you $347,000 in cash. I have given you $576,000 in free rent. My voice cracked, but I kept going. Do you know what your wife whispered to me at my birthday dinner last month? She said, "You'll die alone in a nursing home, Margaret. Nobody will visit you." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. That's what I am to her, I said. An obstacle, an inconvenience. I looked at Victoria one last time. You thought I was a pathetic old woman with nothing to offer. You thought you could manipulate my son into abandoning me. I smiled. I turned to the crowd. Tomorrow morning, my lawyer will be filing eviction papers for the penthouse at Meridian Tower. My son and daughter-in-law have 30 days to vacate. Additionally, I am restructuring my estate so that every penny I own will go to charity upon my death. The Chen Foundation for Education will fund scholarships for students from low-income families. Victoria screamed, "You can't do this!" But David didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it shame? Regret? Anger? I didn't know. And in that moment, I realized I didn't care. "I'm going home now," I said. I walked out of the ballroom with my head held high, leaving behind the chaos I had created. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The eviction was processed smoothly. Victoria hired a lawyer to fight it, but the case was hopeless. She had no lease, no ownership documents, nothing but years of lies. They were out of the penthouse in 23 days. David called me once, 3 days after the gala. His voice was hollow. "You didn't want to know," I replied. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Victoria told me things about you, and I believed her. You should have listened to your own heart. You should have remembered who raised you." There was a long silence. He asked, "I don't know, David. I honestly don't know. You're going to have to show me over time that you've changed, that the boy I raised is still in there somewhere. I can't just take your word for it." He started to cry, the first time I had heard my son cry since he was a child. "I love you too, but love without respect is worthless." I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen, exhausted but strangely peaceful. Dorothy came over an hour later with a plate of cookies and a bottle of wine. "I heard what happened at the gala," she said with a grin. "The whole neighborhood is talking about it." "Maybe." She poured 2 glasses of wine. "Empty," I admitted. I thought confronting Victoria would feel satisfying, but mostly it just feels sad. You didn't destroy his life. Victoria did. I thought about it for a long time. Maybe. Someday. 6 months have passed since that night at the gala. Victoria and David divorced 3 months ago. Apparently, without access to my money, Victoria had no reason to stay married. She took what she could from the settlement and moved back to Connecticut to live with her aging parents. David got a small apartment in a modest neighborhood. He got a real job, something in sales, that pays $62,000 a year. Not luxurious, but honest. He calls me every Sunday now, not to ask for money, just to talk. "I'm learning to cook, Mom," he told me last week. "I made pot roast yesterday." I smiled. "Will you teach me someday?" I paused. It was the first time he had asked for something that wasn't money. The first time he had asked for me. "Maybe," I said. "I can do slow, Mom. I don't know if David and I will ever have the relationship we used to have. Too much has happened. Too many words have been spoken that can't be taken back. But I see glimpses of the boy I raised. The boy who used to help Henry in the garden. The boy who would fall asleep on my lap during thunderstorms. The boy who once told me I was the best mom in the whole world. Maybe that boy is still in there, buried under years of Victoria's poison. Maybe not. Either way, I am no longer waiting to die alone in a nursing home. I am living, fully and completely, on my own terms. I have donated $2 million to the Chen Foundation already, with more to come. I have attended 3 more gala events where I am now greeted with respect and admiration. I have made friends with other property owners, people who see me as a peer rather than a liability. Harold still manages my properties. Patricia still handles my legal affairs. Dorothy still comes over for coffee every Tuesday, and every morning I wake up in the house that Henry and I built together, surrounded by memories of a love that was real and a life that was well lived. Victoria thought I would die alone. She was wrong. I am surrounded by people who respect me, people who value me, people who see me as I truly am, and that, more than any amount of money, is true wealth. Last Sunday, David came to visit in person for the first time since the gala. He arrived with flowers and a homemade cake that looked slightly lopsided but smelled delicious. "I made it myself," he said nervously. We sat in the living room, the same room where Victoria had once looked around with disdain, but now it felt different, warmer, more like home. I knew, some of it at least. I knew Victoria was cruel to you. I knew she said things behind your back, and I didn't stop her because I was weak. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "You deserved better. Dad deserved better." I reached across and took his hand. "Your father used to say that character is what you do when nobody is watching. For a long time, David, you failed that test, but you're here now. You're trying." "Not yet." We ate cake together and talked about nothing important, just life, just family, just two people trying to find their way back to each other. When David left, he hugged me for a long time. A real hug, the kind he used to give me when he was a child. "I love you, Mom," he said. And for the first time in years, I believed it was true. Not just words, not just obligation, real love. Dorothy was right. Money changes people. But sometimes losing money changes them back. If you're listening to this story, I want you to know something. You are not invisible. You are not a burden. You are not defined by how others treat you. I was 68 years old when I finally stood up for myself. I had spent years letting people take advantage of my kindness, my generosity, my love. But it's never too late to demand respect. It's never too late to show the world who you really are. Victoria thought I would die alone in a nursing home. Instead, she's the one who's alone, divorced, disgraced, living with her elderly parents in a house full of resentment. And I am here, in my home, surrounded by people who love me. Not because of my money, but because of who I am. The quiet grandmother in the modest house, the retired school teacher with the old car, the secret millionaire who never needed to prove anything to anyone. That's who I am, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.